Three, two, one. I'd like to welcome to the show a true legend, Mr. Charlie Kendall. How you doing,
Well,
Charlie?
howdy. I'm doing wonderfully. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. I cannot believe I'm talking to you. Unbelievable. I mean, you were my hero growing up. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Well, I don't know whether to thank you or to say, listen, you've got to reorient your priorities here. Anyway, you want to go.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I've checked out your show. You do a great job. Play
Thank
some
you.
great music, and you're very tuned into today's music scene.
Yeah, I try to keep up on everything. So for the people that don't know, let's give them a little history of MetalShop. I mean, how did it start?
MetalShop, the first show was February 1984. I basically had the idea 2 years prior in 1982. Interestingly enough, I did a tour radio special for the Scorpions. They were going out on tour, their first big one, and their management company asked me to do a tour special to run at all the radio stations, in each town they were going into. It was part of their deal, And so I said, okay. And I'm living in Philadelphia, WMMR at the time. And I go into New York to interview the band. And
recording in progress.
All right, keep going.
I go into New York to interview the band, and it's their first trip to America.
Right.
They can barely speak English,
Right.
And the album was Blackout. And the only thing I got initially from the conversation was that the album title and the song was about getting too screwed up to be able to do anything other than pass out. Oh, yeah, it was really back out.
Yeah.
And that was, I had such a good time doing it, and I really enjoyed it. And I realized at that particular moment, there was a whole genre of music that was being ignored by radio.
Right.
And that was hard rock and what was the emerging heavy metal thing.
Right.
A lot of stations wouldn't play Ozzy or Scorpions or anything that was, hard rock until after 10 at night. And sometimes even after midnight.
Right.
But I figured that they would promote it. Hey, Ozzy Osbourne's going to be here Friday night at midnight. And I went and pitched a bunch of networks and syndicators on the fact that I thought there was a market there.
Right.
And everybody said no.
Right.
However, I then got promoted from Philadelphia to New York, and I went back to the syndicators, and suddenly there was more interest because they could get to New York and could sell advertising and were then interested. And same thing as today,
Right.
And MJI Broadcasting was the most enthusiastic about it. They were still not convinced. John McGann was the producer of the show at the time.
Right.
And because I couldn't do the production and run WNEW FM in New York, station was in the toilet.
Right.
I mean, it was literally second from the bottom of the ratings in New York.
Oh,
the bottom of the ratings was WHTZ, Z100.
Right.
Scott Shannon's infamous worst to first campaign, which he did. His first day on the air was my first day in the PD chair at WNEW. So anyway, we get to Josh Feigenbaum. He's not totally convinced. And McGann says, I'm going to take him to see Judas Priest at Madison Square Garden. About 15, 20 minutes into the show, he's like, okay, I get it. I mean, it was a sold-out show. The crowd was nuts. And he said, I see it. I see what you're talking about. Because the passion was there for the music.
Right.
And we were able to get it off the ground. And it was the only one on national syndication almost up until it ended 11 years later.
Right.
And then, Eddie Trunk comes along and does his thing. You had, and Dee Snider, whose brother was also a producer for me, Mark Snider, his little brother.
Yeah.
Mark became a producer for me and then later went into the record business. And Snider, went from the music business to being a host of a heavy metal show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a complete circle on everything. And I really enjoyed it and had a good time, but I went out and I bought some radio stations and I did a couple of other business games.
Right.
And that's what they are. And my son, who was at the time in his 40s, said, "Dad, there's a market for MetalShop."
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I don't, there's a lot of competition. Alice Cooper's doing a show,
Right.
And there are a lot of people doing it and doing a good job of it. You're one of them now.
Thank you.
And he said, that's not the point. He said, it gives you something to do so that you're not sitting around bored. He knew
Right.
me, and I was. And I got back into it thanks to a guy named Corey Harker. Corey was the guy who is still the guy who does Ron Keel's online station.
Oh, yeah.
KRFK Radio.
Right.
And he's in charge of that. And he came out of radio in Twin Cities area. And I was looking for copies of the show because they weren't available.
Yeah, they got lost or something, didn't they?
No, they got thrown away.
Or thrown away, yeah.
Yeah, Clear Channel bought MJI Broadcasting.
Right.
And they didn't want to pay for the storage of all of their master tapes.
All that history.
All that history thrown out in the garbage.
Man.
And when Josh, my son, brought it up, I said, I don't know if we can get the masters. I went to look for the masters, and since it was iHeart's people,
Right.
I went to their syndication wing. Their president at the time, Julie Talbot, was also the sales manager for MJI Broadcasting. So she
Right.
sold MetalShop for 11 years, to advertisers.
Right.
And I went to her and she says, Charlie, Clear Channel didn't want to pay for it, for the storage, and they threw everything away. I said, well, what if I want to revive the show? And he says, it's your voice, but there are no masters for me to sell you.
Right.
And they didn't want them.
Right.
So do whatever you want to do. And I'm like, okay. So I start looking for the shows. That's where I get into Corey. Corey's also a collector.
Right.
I mean, he has everything I did on NBC Network, Westwood One, ABC, the Rolling Stones specials.
Yeah.
And he has a great many of the MetalShop shows.
Nice.
And
Yeah,
we were able to pull some stuff out of it, but now the technology is such that I can pull out my interview with Ozzy Osbourne from 1983
Right.
by itself without the music underneath it. I
Right.
can extract it. And
Right.
you couldn't do that 10 years ago when my son brought this up.
No.
But you could a year ago when I sat down with Corey Harker. So now Corey produces my new show.
Very cool.
And he's
Yeah.
good with that.
Speaking of Ozzy, in fact, I have on cassette tape here somewhere in my studio the tribute to Randy Rhoads that you did, that show that you did it as a tribute to Randy Rhoads. Where
That was the third or fourth show. Yeah.
Yeah, where like Dee Snider was on there, and a couple guys from Quiet Riot and stuff like that. That was
Remember, we were the only
I know
outlet. There was no other outlet. So
No.
everybody came to us.
right,
You know how hard it is now to get
Yeah.
interviews.
right,
It's hard to get guys to talk to you for more than 5 or 10 minutes because
Right,
they run along
exactly.
to the next Zoom.
But how have you seen the radio scene change since then?
Wow. Radio is really a shell of its former self.
Right,
Everything is on cost effectiveness. Everything is all about, can we make money on this?
right,
How much of a gamble is it to try this or try that?
right,
They want to be safe on everything.
right,
They want to be safe on classic country. And they do research, and they put on their little pencils and notepads and try to do, classic country is like, to me, what metal is.
Right.
It's a passion thing.
Oh, yeah.
The people who like classic country like Johnny Cash. They like Dolly Parton,
Right.
They like Hank Williams.
That's why I do what I do, because it's for the love of the music, and people like yourself I grew up on.
Well, I don't have to tell you, it's, fortunately for me, I'm similar. I'm sort of retired,
Right.
and this is all I do.
Right.
Well, thank God I don't have to depend on it to make a living.
Right.
Because I don't think there is one to be made at this point. Alice Cooper's making one. Eddie Trunk's making one. Eddie's hosting things left and right, like the Monsters of Rock cruise and other things. And I'm sure he's making a fortune from that.
Right.
And his syndication group, they are among the best going. Alice Cooper now is into a 5 or 6 hour show.
Oh, wow.
That comes out nightly.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, fighting Alice Cooper, I don't think I want to go there.
Right.
I mean, he's Alice Cooper and I ain't. Next.
So, I mean, you were the staple for a lot of bands back in the 80s. I mean, bringing MetalShop on board. What's one of your most memorable bands or artists that you have interviewed over the years?
I've interviewed Mick Jagger, Keith Richards. I've interviewed Paul McCartney. I've interviewed all sorts of people. When I set up MetalShop, I set it up as the program director of WNEW FM in New York. I had a station to run and get, like I said, out of the toilet.
Right.
And I couldn't do everything.
Right.
I couldn't stop in the middle of my day and sit and talk to Ozzy. Ozzy, if you've ever done Ozzy as an interview, he's hell on wheels. Ozzy, can you say that again in English?
No.
Fuck. I mean, that's the way talking to Ozzy was.
Right.
And you can get it out of him. It just takes a while.
Right.
And I didn't have that kind of time. And all of my producers were able to get to those interviews.
Right.
MJI, there were probably 10 to 15 people working on MetalShop alone.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people working on that, and they did most of the interviews. I did a few.
Right.
But, now I do about half of them.
Right.
I just talked to a guy named Anthony Gomes, who's the number one blues guy.
Oh, yeah, Anthony.
Of 2022, 23, had a number one blues album.
Yeah.
He's from Toronto, Canada.
Yep.
He's a scholar. He's got a master's degree in history. And he did his thesis on blues.
Yeah, there's a lot of great artists coming out of Canada right now. It's amazing what I get in here from Canada. It's crazy.
Well, he has a new album that is a rockin' album.
Oh, yeah.
It is. It's got roots in Angus Young, Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
That's where it's all in there. He had never done that before because, well, no, it's like, what they told Bob Dylan. You can't put an electric guitar on that.
Right.
And that's what they told you can't. No, you're a blues guy. You got to be a blues guy. And he went, no, I like blues and I like rock and roll. And he put them together,
Right.
Chocolate and peanut butter. Holy moly. Here we go.
Yeah. He's an amazing
And this new album
artist.
of his is called Praise the Loud.
Yeah.
Which works in a title all by itself. And you got to get it on your show because it's absolutely killer.
Yeah. I've been listening to him for a few years, and he is absolutely amazing.
I really enjoyed talking to him. Jizzy Pearl, I had an interesting interview with.
Good old Jizzy.
Jizzy's a piece of work. And, there's a lot of great guys out there now
Right.
who are doing the right thing.
Right.
And I found that some of them remember, some of them don't,
Right.
but that's okay. As long as they talk to me and I can move along.
So, what's your take on streaming and digital platforms nowadays? I mean, compared to, I was raised on radio, old school. My dad was a jock, and, so I was raised around old school radio. And what's your take on all the digital platforms and stuff today?
My take is that it's here. It's here, and it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
It's
you think it's better or worse?
It's a very difficult question because it's better and it's worse.
Right.
It's nice that you can experiment. It's nice that you can try things. It's nice that you can do things from the heart,
right,
from your gut, and not just, one based on computations.
Right.
Which is what radio has become. It's become a computation, and a lot of metal doesn't fit into that.
Right.
But a lot of it does, because they know that they're out there and they're making it.
Right.
It's because I found once I started doing it that, I can take my radio, right here on my phone, wherever I go. I can Bluetooth it into my car, and I don't have to listen to, the Carpenters on the radio.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the ones that hammer on wood.
I know what you're talking about.
And so it's here. It's happening.
Right.
The top 3 metals of the week used to be whatever radio was playing.
Right.
And when we came back a year and a half ago, we started with that, taking what radio was playing, and it was crap,
right.
And it wasn't metal,
no,
for the most part, whatever, and you're talking about iHeart for the most part, whatever they call metal wasn't really metal.
No.
And then I'm looking at what's selling and what's being consumed. What's the most listened to music? Well, now we're talking Spotify.
Yeah.
Now we're talking YouTube.
Right.
Now we're talking, iHeart, iTunes.
Right.
So it's a whole different thing. And I've started now I totally ignore the radio part of it.
Right.
As far as what the top 3 metals of the week are. And I take the streams. Now, the thing that's odd for me is that, like last week, the number 1 metal was Metallica and won.
Yeah.
But it was the version from Mexico City last year on this new tour.
Right.
So that was the most streamed song of the week.
Oh, wow.
And I was taken aback. I was like, well, okay, there you go. And then some of the other things that are on there, are 8, 10, 12 years old.
Right.
And that's not for me to decide. What are the most listened to songs in metal for the week? And that's that's my criteria for it now.
Right. So since MetalShop has come back, how has it been received? I mean, when I saw that you came back, I was like, what? No way. This can't be happening. Is this a dream?
Well, it's in your name, Doc Rock's Metal Shop.
Right.
I mean, Metal Shop is synonymous with metal and fun and music.
Right.
So, and you can't copyright the word Metal Shop.
Right.
It's too ubiquitous. It's already out there. I think the actual, metalshop.com is owned by a T-shirt company, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they made, there's another one that's a metal shop that's on YouTube, and they're a metal company. They're a fabrication company.
Yeah.
They actually work with not the musical metal, the hard steel stuff.
Right.
And I like to ride, so I understand that part of it too.
Right.
So that's why when I came back, I was like, okay, Charlie Kendall's Metal Shop is all I can do. There's nothing else I can do.
Right.
Nobody can bust me on copyright because it's me and it's mine. And
Right.
I've had people ask me about your show, and there's several others. I think about 3 or 4 altogether that
Right.
use the word Metal Shop in their name,
Right.
and that's cool. I'm glad it's ubiquitous.
Well,
like Kleenex.
How mine started was I started this show in a local bar here in Pittsburgh 26 years ago. And I was DJing in the club, and local bands started bringing me their CDs. Hey, play this, play that, play this, play that. And it gave everybody a chance to hear what everybody else was doing. So I said over the microphone one night, I said, we need to call this something. And they're like, Metal Shop 101. It's like going to class, like the old Metal Shop class we had in school. I said,
I think it's great. It's a great name.
I said, cool. So I kept it over the years and ran with it. And, it's been a fun ride. It's been a fun ride. So, but
how many stations are you on now?
I think I'm on like 68 stations.
See, I'm only on 22 stations. But we
got to help you out.
Been doing this for, like trying to get on other stations.
Right.
For, the last year.
Right.
It's a whole nother thing. And I don't have a firm or a company or anybody who's out there doing it for me.
Right. Yeah. It's just been, it's been a heck of a ride. And, when you brought Metal Shop back this time and I heard that classic buzzsaw in that Metal Shop, I just got like flashbacks to being a kid, because like I said, I grew up listening to you. It was you and Dr. Demento on KMET 94.7. That's all it was back then.
Well, I think we were the most played program in parking lots across America during the entire 1980s. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can remember I grew up in California in the 80s, and I can remember going to Tower Records record meets in the back parking lot, So, and back in them times in L.A. was crazy, It was just nuts. And, Charlie Kendall was the man behind the mic and bringing it to us. So,
a block down from Tower on Sunset was where KWST, the radio station, existed. And they were on the, actually up on the roof, was the radio station. And the block up the hill from Tower was where I lived.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in 76, 77.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is 2 blocks away from the Whiskey.
Yeah.
So I got to be out there when it was truly the Wild West.
Yeah, I was out there, like, I remember the US Festival, that was what, 82, 83?
83, I believe.
Yeah, and stuff like that. So I was there, right during the explosion of Motley Crue and all that stuff.
Yeah, I watched this documentary, I think that's on Hulu, about the metal explosion in the 80s, and they had a lot of the backstage stuff, and half the scenes are shadowed out things of Tommy Lee standing there, getting head, in the middle of the hallway, and then they got it shadowed out, but you can tell what's going on, and Tommy's just grinning. Yeah, they were certainly no holds barred in that game.
Oh yeah, Charlie, you have any? I'll ask you one more question. I'll let you go. You have any advice for any aspiring radio DJs up and coming?
If you feel it, if you do it, and it makes you happy, you should give it a shot. That's the thing about what's here in the digital age. if you can, for me, when I'm putting together a show, I'm in a different zone. I'm in a different world. It's an alternate reality, and I like it there.
Oh, yeah, so do I.
I'm very comfortable there,
Right.
and I get joy and happiness from playing music, exposing music, and leading people to something that I think works. And conversely, I like getting it back. And that's an interesting thing about now. I'm getting most of my leads on new stuff from people, on Facebook,
Right.
sending me a Facebook post about, hey man, have you heard da da da? And
Oh, yeah.
and I go check it out and go, yeah, that'll work.
That's it. So Charlie, I cannot thank you enough. It has been a great honor to have you come on the show. I mean, you were one of my childhood heroes, and it's just been absolutely amazing.
Just another guy in the neighborhood.
Mr. Charlie Kendall, I thank you. And it's just been, MetalShop was it back in the day. That was the thing. I mean, and you just, oh man, just amazing to sit here and talk with you. And I can imagine you got some stories.
I don't like to get into stories a whole lot.
Right. I get that. But it's been absolutely great having you on here.
One of the things that I found a meeting over a 60-year career,
right?
Rock stars. Some of them are assholes.
Recording stopped.
Yeah.
There you go. That wraps up the whole show right there. Some of them
are, but for the most part, I mean, I have not had, I've had so many bands through the MetalShop here over the years, and I've only had like one or two that ever really rubbed me wrong, but other than that.
And that's all it takes. And for